All right, yesterday on the Hill, House of Representatives had an extraordinary hearing with regard to the rise of anti-Semitism that we've seen on college campuses. The chairwoman of the Education Committee, Virginia Fox, called in the president of Harvard, president of MIT, and the president of the University of Pennsylvania. New York Congresswoman Elise Stefanik asked a very simple question. Is calling for the genocide of the Jews against your school's policy, your code of conduct, and your policy against bullying? And I honestly think that if you watch the way Elise Stefanik does this questioning, and I'm going to play the video right now, I really think that she assumed they were going to all say yes. Of course, that's against our rules. Because then she would follow up and say, okay, then why haven't you enforced the rules? But no, it didn't actually go that way.
At MIT, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate MIT's code of conduct or rules regarding bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
If targeted at individuals, not making public statements.
Yes or no? Calling for the genocide of Jews does not constitute bullying and harassment?
I have not heard calling for the genocide for Jews on our campus.
But you've heard chants for intifada.
I've heard chants, which can be anti-Semitic depending on the context, when calling for the elimination of the Jewish people.
So those would not be according to the MIT's code of conduct or rules?
That would be investigated as harassment if pervasive and severe.
Ms. McGill, at Penn, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's rules or code of conduct? Yes or no?
If the speech turns into conduct, it can be harassment, yes.
I am asking specifically calling for the genocide of Jews. Does that constitute bullying or harassment?
If it is directed and severe or pervasive, it is harassment.
So the answer is yes.
It is a context-dependent decision, Congresswoman.
It's a context-dependent decision. That's your testimony today. Calling for the genocide of Jews is depending upon the context. That is not bullying or harassment. This is the easiest question to answer yes, Ms. McGill. So is your testimony that you will not answer yes?
If it if the
yes
speech
or
becomes
no?
if the speech becomes conduct, it can be harassment, yes.
Conduct meaning committing the act of genocide? The speech is not harassment? This is unacceptable, Ms. McGill. I'm going to give you one more opportunity for the world to see your answer. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Penn's code of conduct when it comes to bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be harassment.
The answer is yes.
No, actually, I think the answer was no, Congresswoman Stefanik. By the way, the other thing that the University of Pennsylvania is recently famous for is that they paid hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars to Joe Biden to be a visiting professor there. That's Joe Biden's college that he actually never taught a class in. She was asked, by the way, what did Joe Biden do actually to earn the $1 million he gave him? He invited people to come and speak. He invited other people to come and lecture. So he was basically hired as a party planner for $1 million. So there you go. Calling for the genocide of the Jews needs to be contextualized, according to these university presidents. We haven't even hit Harvard yet. But let me just be clear. What did she just say? If it reaches the point of conduct, right? Aren't these the people who have been telling us that language is violence, that speech is violence, that they need a safe space if somebody accidentally calls a she a he because, you know, the she looks like a he or was born a he? And now they're suddenly free speech absolutists? Scott Walker from Young America's Foundation should have been sitting there with contracts for these people saying, we'd like a multi-year deal for Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, Liz Wheeler, Larry O'Connor to come and give speeches on campus. Now that you're okay with any kind of speech, as long as it doesn't reach the point of conduct, could we just make a deal right now? Because for the last several years, maybe decades now, I've seen my fellow conservatives chased off campus by angry mobs because they dare to give a speech on campus that says, you know what, Ronald Reagan had some really good ideas. That's violence. But calling for the genocide of the Jews, hey, well, you know, let's pull back a minute and find out what the context here is. All right, let's bring Harvard into this.
And Dr. Gay, at Harvard, does calling for the genocide of Jews violate Harvard's rules of bullying and harassment? Yes or no?
It can be, depending on the context.
What's the context?
Targeted as an individual, at an individual.
It's
Severe,
targeted at
pervasive.
Jewish students, Jewish individuals. Do you understand your testimony is dehumanizing them? Do you understand that dehumanization is part of anti-Semitism? I will ask you one more time.
Yeah, she asked one more time, and the answer is the same. Have you noticed they're all using the same language too? Not out of context, right? Context is the big bugaboo here on this. Good for Congresswoman Stefanik, by the way, because it is incredibly dehumanizing. Think about what they're saying here. Is calling for the genocide of Jews against your code of conduct, is it bullying? Only if it's targeting an individual. Think that through for a minute. You're a Jewish student at Harvard. Dr. Gay's school is Harvard. You're a Jewish student at Harvard, and you see a giant protest going on, calling for the genocide of the Jewish people, and you complain, and they say, but they weren't talking about you specifically. They were talking about all the Jews. Don't take it so personally. That's Harvard's position right now on this. Oh, and by the way, they're all lying. They're all lying. John Hassan from Town Hall actually did some research and looked at Harvard's non-discrimination policy. It was implemented just a few months ago. It defines bullying as, quoting now, words or actions that humiliate, degrade, demean, intimidate, or threaten an individual. Are you telling me that a Jewish student at Harvard doesn't feel intimidated or threatened or degraded when these pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist protesters are screaming from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, thus resulting in the elimination of the Israeli state and thus resulting in the death of millions of Jews? You're telling me that isn't threatening or intimidating? They're all lying. All of them. But let's finish here with testimony. Well, it's not testimony. This is a press conference that was given by the House Republicans that included this young woman who is, in fact, a Jewish student at MIT. The MIT president there was like, well, you know, only if it targets an individual. Here's what's happening right now at MIT. You talk about targeting an individual.
Thank you so much, Representative Fox and Representative Stefanik, for inviting me here today. My name is Talia Khan. I am an undergraduate alumna of MIT and a current graduate student at MIT. I am the daughter of a Jewish mother and an Afghan Muslim immigrant father. I am the proud president of the MIT-Israel Alliance, and I am a Jewish student currently immersed in an extremely toxic anti-Semitic atmosphere at MIT. The MIT administration, namely President Sally Kornbluth, has failed to address the crisis of rampant anti-Semitism on campus. There is a radical anti-Israel group at MIT called the CAA. In recent weeks, the CAA's anti-Semitic rhetoric has shifted the culture on campus to such an extreme of intolerance that 70% of MIT's Jewish students polled feel forced to hide their identities and perspectives. An Israeli student whose identity and personal info was sold online for a bounty has not left his dorm room in weeks out of fear due to death threats. For my part, I was forced to leave my study group for my doctoral exams halfway through the semester because my group members told me that the people at the Nova Music Festival deserved to die because they were partying on stolen land.
She goes on and she does a great job, and your heart breaks for her and her fellow students. But apparently you have to be a Republican now in Congress, or in this country for that matter, to actually see this bigotry for what it is. And I hope American Jews are seeing who's standing by them and who's calling this hatred out, who's calling this bigotry out. And also, where is the media on this story? For the last several years, I've been told that what happened in Charlottesville was the most horrendous display of racism, bigotry, and anti-Semitism that America has seen since the civil rights era of the 60s. And I'm sorry, But we're seeing Charlottesville on steroids on a daily basis in this country. And frankly, nothing like what you just heard this young woman describe going on the campus of MIT in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Nothing like that happened in Charlottesville. Joe Biden said he was running for president to restore the soul of America because of what he saw at Charlottesville. Well, look at what's happened to the soul of America on his watch every day, and he says nothing. And his press secretary makes excuses for it. And if you raise the specter of outward anti-Semitic bigotry in this country to the press secretary, she immediately pivots and talks about anti-Muslim hate. This is disgusting what's going on. But please remember who's really on the side of the Jewish people and who's on the side of the bigots.